many remember what we talked about last week?
Commandments.
I was waiting on that. Last week we talked about the commandment of Jesus to let your light shine. And the idea of that is letting Jesus is the light of the world and letting His light shine through us. Referred specifically to two verses, Colossians 4, 5, and 6. It talks about conducting yourselves with wisdom for outsiders. That way, outsiders are those non-believers, people outside the church. And we should conduct ourselves, our lifestyle should be such as to show that we are different and that we are to be able to explain to them with kindness and gentleness what the love of Jesus is, and yet the justness of God in the sense of those who reject Jesus, eternal condemnation. And then in Ephesians 4, 1 and 3, it talks about walking in a manner worthy of our calling. We are called to be children of God, a royalty, and our lifestyle should reflect upon that. Then last Sunday night, we talked about reconciliation and how reconciliation actually precedes worship. Okay? And to the idea of, Paul wrote and said that in Romans 12:1, that we are to submit ourselves as a living offering to God that is holy and pure and acceptable to Him. And the only way we, if we have this, holding this anger in our heart toward another believer, that's a blemish on our heart, and that's a sinfulness on our heart, and we should deal with that and reconcile with our brothers and sisters in Christ. This morning we're going to talk about relationship between the husband and the wife, talking about dealing continued out of the Sermon on the Mount, dealing with chapter 5, verses 27 and 23. Through 32. Now, before we go into that, I need to deal with some definitions. Okay? Not definitions by the sense of how we define it today, but definition on what it means and meant to the people that had heard it for the first time, which is very similar to the meanings that we have today. The first word is lust. That's to have a strong desire for someone or something. Okay, and to the extent of, like we had the box down here, if I would tell that was one of those kids that had something very special in it, and they wanted it, and they longed for it, that would, to an extent, become a lust of that. Okay? The second word is adultery. Sexual relations outside of marriage. It's for a married person to have sexual relations with someone other than their spouse. Now, there's another word that is the Scriptures talk about is fornication, and that's sexual relations between two people who are not married. Neither one of them are married, and so it's outside of marriage. But the idea of dealing with adultery is a spouse having relations with someone who's not their spouse. Then there's the word divorce. It's to dismiss from the house. Even to a more intense definition, it's to refuse to be associated with someone. Okay? Two people who get a divorce, a husband and wife who get a divorce, are refusing to associate with each other as a husband and wife again. Okay, so with those definitions there, let's turn to Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. It says, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.'" When Jesus says, "You have heard that it is said," or was said, what's He referring to there? To what? Yeah. It's the Mosaic Law, the Ten Commandments. If you look back at the Ten Commandments, it says, "Do not commit adultery." Okay? He says, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that everyone who looks on a woman to lust for her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. And if your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. For it is better for you for one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. For it is better for you that one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to go to hell. The idea that's coming into Jesus is taking the literal letter of the law and taking it a step further. You know, you've heard of the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, right? Jesus is saying, you've heard it said, that's the letter of the law. But let me explain to you what God's intention was on that. First of all, we need to understand what adultery is from the viewpoint of the biblical times, the Jewish leaders. The Pharisees taught that the only way to commit adultery was through physical action. In other words, the man and woman have a physical action. From the Pharisees' point of view, that was enough to commit adultery. Jesus said that adultery begins in the heart. Adultery begins in the heart to the extent of when you lust. When you look now, let's put this clear. Looking at a man looking at a woman and acknowledging that she's beautiful, is that lust? No. But if that man dwells on that woman and begins to imagine what it would be like to be with her, does that become lust? Yes, there is a strong desire for that. And Jesus is saying that in itself is wrong. That you've already put your eyes toward that. It's a desiring to the point of you really want something. I was reading a Chuck Swindoll story, and he talked about a husband and a wife that were on a trip and going to the mountains just outside of Los Angeles. And they were pretty good ways away from it, in about 7,500 miles, but they could see the snow-capped mountains. And boy, he just looked and said, man, that's beautiful. I just can't wait to get there. Well, they got, the place where they were going was at about 6,000 feet. They got up to about 4,500 feet, and all of a sudden, some white stuff started appearing on this 2-lane road they were driving. And his wife said, are you sure you want to go on? And he looked and says, you know, we're only about 15 minutes away. I think we can make it and enjoy our vacation. Well, the further he went, the stronger the winds got. A blizzard storm started coming in. They said, man, I can't make it. So he turned around. And about that time, he started remembering a conversation he had with his wife before they ever left Los Angeles. You know, you really ought to get some snow chains. His response was, nah, we're going to make it just fine. Well, for the next hour and a half, trying to get down from that mountain, he was wishing he had snow chains. But the point that he was making is once he got down, everything was okay. But from a distance, he saw those mountains, snow-capped mountains, and boy, he couldn't wait to get there. That's sin. That's like lust. I see it. And then I start going after it. And then I paid the consequences of it. Okay? And Jesus says, got to the point where he says, you know, if your eye offends you, pluck it out. Because it's better to go into, to survive and go into heaven with missing a body part than to have everything and go into hell. Or if your hand offends you, cut it off. Now let me ask you a real serious question here. Can plucking out an eye or cutting off a hand make you stop lusting? No. Jesus was not promoting mutilation. But what he did want you to understand is the cost of following through. Because where does lust start? With the eye. That's how they believed it. The eye was the passageway to the soul, to the heart. And that's where it began. And then where does lust become a reality? Through the hand. And so Jesus says, dealing with that, what you see with the eye will eventually become action with the hand. It starts at a distance. You see it, but it draws you ever closer. How do you prevent that? How do you stop that? It's kind of, cutting off a hand is going to make you hurt for a while. I guess a long while. But the reality is the temptation is still there. How do we deal with that temptation? You take your eyes off the temptation and put it back on God. In other words, you cut it off. You stop doing what you're doing and turn your focus back on God. When temptation rears its ugly head between a husband and a wife, stop what you're doing. Look back up to God and the person that God has placed in your life. Okay? Don't give in to the temptation. But it takes intentional choices. I've got to recognize what I'm doing. Husbands, for most of the time, your wife recognizes it. And wife, you need to slap the husband upside the head. Get his attention. But there's what wives, you get caught up in the same thing. But you stop what you're doing, you refocus on God, who is the center, or should be the center of a relationship between a husband and wife who are believers. Okay? And you should be honest enough to go to that. But eventually this issue of divorce comes up. Verse 31. And it was said, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for the cause of unchastity or infidelity or immorality, depends on your translation, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. How many of you have ever heard that come out in marriage relationship? Okay, I've had to counsel several who have been divorced. It says, how do we? The Bible says I'm committing adultery, not making her commit adultery. Let's go back just a moment and understand what it meant to the people who Jesus was saying this to. Turn to Matthew chapter 19. This is a little bit more extensive definition and explanation of divorce, marriage and divorce. Chapter 19, verse 1. And it came about that when Jesus had finished these words, he departed from Galilee and came into the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. And some Pharisees came to him, and testing him, and said, testing, what are they doing? What are they about to do? They're trying to trick him into giving an answer that they can argue with, right? They were testing him and saying, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause at all? Jesus answered and said, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? Male and female, emphasize. Not he and he, or she and she. Male and female. And he said, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Consequently, they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. And they said to him, why then did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and send her away? And he said to them, because of your hardness of heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it has not been this way. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. Understanding at that day, there were two schools of thought about divorce. There was one side that said you cannot divorce for anything except immorality, or what we today would call an affair. And that was the only grounds for divorce. There was another school that said you can divorce your wife for anything. Notice it was the husband divorcing the wife. Why? Because the woman had no rights. But there was one school of thought that said that he could divorce her for any reason. If she didn't cook his supper right and he didn't like it, he could divorce her for that. If she didn't keep the house clean, if she did, whatever reason. Today we've got that irreconcilable differences or whatever type of thing that they use. But the idea that's coming in is these two were the schools of thought, and they were going back to Moses and saying, well, what about this certificate of divorce? I was reading Dr. Bob Utley, and he says, consider the statement in the culture of that day, in society of that day. A certificate of divorce was designed to address a social problem by protecting the wife, who had no rights or resources in that culture. The act of divorcing a wife caused the woman to be stigmatized within the community as an adulteress, whether she was guilty or not. The one marrying her also became stigmatized. According to A.T. Robertson in his book, The Word Pictures of the New Testament, Jesus is not making a dogmatic statement referring to remarriage as being adultery. It dealt more with the Jewish views of inheritance. Now, I didn't go into all that detail, or we'd be preaching another sermon right now. But understanding this idea of certificate of divorce, it protected the woman, and showing, that she didn't have any resources, but as she married somebody else, that it's one of those things that darn if I do and darn if I don't, right? And so as they were going into it, this marriage divorce had become just a simple tool in making it easier. We do the same thing today. But I was amazed. Now, how many of you ever heard that around 50% of marriages today end in divorce? You've heard that? I found something out a little bit more interesting. The first marriage, 41 to 50% end in divorce. If you marry a second time, 60 to 67% of those end in a divorce. And if you marry a third time, you've got 73 to 74% of those end in divorce. In other words, divorce becomes easy. Divorce becomes the answer to issues. Children of divorced parents are 4 times more likely to have children that divorce against those whose parents are not divorced. Let me rephrase that, because I got all confused. Children of divorced parents are 4 times more likely to get a divorce than children of parents who did not divorce. The problem that we're getting in today is people just choose not to marry, so we don't have to worry about getting a divorce. We just live together. The majority of the problems within our society have been traced back to the family structure, the destruction of the family structure. Marriage is important. Marriage is sacred. Who performed the first wedding? God did. When he brought Adam and Eve together and said, a man shall leave his mother and father and cleave to the wife, and they shall become one flesh. Marriage is sacred. It was ordained, it was established by God. Paul, in his letters to the Ephesians, described marriage in relationship to Christ and his bride, the church. And the earthly marriage is symbolic of that. And it should never end. Now, let's be honest. We get divorces. We deal with them. We have to. As a pastor, I don't like dealing with divorces, but sometimes it's just part of the requirement. The idea from what I'm seeing is if two people choose to get married, remarried, and God is the center of their relationship, forget the past. Forget it. We're dealing with right here and now. That two people who committed themselves to each other and to God, as God being the center of the relationship. Or is there an adultery committed there? No. Because Jesus wasn't sitting there talking about what's the loophole, how do I get out of it? Jesus was in here emphasizing what the importance is. The relationship between the husband and wife. And the two people who get divorced are remarried to someone and God is the center of their life, and they're making sure that God stays the center of their life, and they're doing the work to make that marriage work with God the center of their life. I don't think God's whispering in their ear, you just wait till you get in front of me. That's not the message. The message is commit yourself to God. Have the marriage that God takes. It's not easy. It's not impossible, as much as some people can think. It takes love. It takes commitment. And it takes the willingness to say, I'm sorry. Right? We remember the movie Love Story, you know, love means never having to say you're sorry. I'm sorry, I believe love means you will and are willing to say you're sorry. There's one thing that amazes me in today's society is how the focus is on the ease of marriage, of divorce. How many of you have ever noticed that a married couple who are having troubles seek advice from a divorced couple? Now, is a divorced couple going to say, work it out? No, they're going to say it's easy. Get a divorce. Okay? No. Don't take the easy way out. My wife and I, when we met each other the second time, and I proposed to her the second time I saw her, we went into the marriage with an understanding. There were two words that were not in our vocabulary: separation and divorce. Does that mean we had an easy life for the past 39 years? It has been 39, right? Okay. No, we've had our moments. But the idea means that we don't let those moments destroy what God has given. Jesus very often identified the unfortunate consequences of disobedience. But we have a God that forgives when we confess. I had to counseling with one couple that they had both been divorced from very difficult situations, and it wasn't them that initiated divorce. divorced, but they came to me and they said, what do we do? Because the Bible says if we get married, they had been living together for about a year. The Bible says if we get married, we're committing adultery. What do? We don't want to get married. And I had to ask them, I said, did you feel like you had committed any kind of a sin that needed forgiveness prior to this? Well, you know my attitude. Confess before God. He forgives. And that forgiveness, that sin no longer exists in God's eyes. So you're not carrying that over. And I would say that to anybody that's getting in a relationship. Don't carry your baggage into the relationship. Deal with it with God first. And move on into that. I say, and I believe that what Jesus is saying in this, is quit looking for the easy way out. And do the hard work to make it work. Amen? Eddie, Janita, how long have y'all been married? Can't count that high, right?
57.
Got enough toes?
61 years.
61 years. It's been easy the whole time, right? It takes work. It takes work. If you're having problems in your marriage, don't go to somebody who has divorced as a solution. Go to someone who's been married 61 years and find out how to make it work. Amen?